200 dock workers stood along Pier 7 of the Halcyon terminal on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, the kind of men who arrived before the fog lifted and stayed until it came back. Then the crane swung wrong and the Meridian Star listed 4 degrees to port, and every loading sequence on the eastern berth locked simultaneously. The new port director, Cassandra Reeve, appeared on the gantry above them and pointed at the one man already moving toward the problem. "That man," she said loud enough for all of it to carry, "is not a licensed systems engineer. Get him away from my infrastructure." The laughter was low, the kind that comes from men who are not cruel but are tired. Caleb Marsh did not look up. He set his hand flat on the mooring panel and kept reading. 40 minutes later, the Meridian Star was level, the loading sequence was running, and the $4.2 million delay penalty Halcyon had been 40 minutes from incurring had been stopped by a man whose badge said General Dock Operations. Nobody laughed after that. Caleb's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building 4 blocks from the water. The walls held no photographs except one. A woman standing at the stern of a vessel with her hair moving in the wind and her eyes looking somewhere past the camera. Her name had been Sarah. She had died 2 years earlier in a car accident on the coast road when Mara was 11 months old. Caleb had walked away from his maritime engineering post 6 weeks later and never gone back to that kind of work. Not officially. Mara was 3 now. She woke at 6 with the particular urgency of a child for whom mourning was a project. She owned a stuffed seal she called Anchor, a gray thing with one repaired flipper that she carried everywhere with the seriousness of someone transporting important cargo. She sat at the kitchen table each morning with Anchor propped against her juice cup and watched her father eat. "Are the big boats there today?" she asked one morning. Caleb set her jacket on the chair beside her. "Most of them." She nodded as though this confirmed something. "Good." She picked up Anchor. Anchor likes the big boats. He tied her shoes with the care of a man who had learned that a loose lace at the wrong moment costs more than the time it takes to tie it properly. He dropped her at the neighbor's by 6:45. He was at the pier by 7. The Halcyon shipping terminal processed cargo from 14 countries without pause. Its real infrastructure, the systems governing load distribution, vessel stabilization, berth sequencing, and ballast management, was a layered architecture of old and new, analog controls grafted onto digital platforms by 3 generations of engineers who had each believed they were improving on the last. Almost nobody understood it completely. Almost nobody. Caleb had joined the dock crew 26 months earlier. His application listed 8 years of general maritime labor and a reference from a small coastal freight operator that had since closed. Within 3 months, his shift supervisor Frank Delgado had noticed something. Frank was 61, built like a man who had spent 4 decades on water. On the 4th week, he had watched Caleb spend 8 minutes looking at the load sequencing display without touching it. Then make one adjustment, then walk away. The sequence ran clean for the rest of the shift. "You've done this before," Frank said, "not what you put on the form." Caleb looked at the horizon. "I do what's needed." Frank nodded once and never asked again. He also, quietly, made sure Caleb was on the floor whenever the system ran difficult cargo. The Meridian Star problem had been building for 6 months before Cassandra Reeve arrived. A structural resonance fault in the eastern berth's load distribution algorithm. A conflict between the original 1994 code, patched 11 times, and a ballast monitoring update from 2 years prior. Under specific load conditions, the 2 systems produced contradictory instructions. The crane followed the newer instruction. The ballast system followed the older one. The vessel listed, the sequence locked. 3 contractors had reviewed the system. Each filed a report describing symptoms with precision and cause with uncertainty. The terminal had been managing the fault operationally, experienced dock personnel reading the early warning signs and intervening manually before the conflict triggered. The intervention was not documented. It was not official. It was Caleb, twice a month, standing at the mooring panel for 40 minutes, doing what needed to be done. Cassandra Reeve had been appointed port director 8 weeks earlier. She was 31, credentialed, sharp in the way of people who had competed hard for things and won most of them. She had seen Caleb on the gantry footage twice, moving through restricted access areas with the ease of a man who did not experience them as restricted. She had flagged it. She had not yet acted. On the Tuesday morning of the Meridian Star incident, she arrived on the gantry at 7:22. When the display board shifted and one man was already moving toward the panel, she recognized him from the footage. General Operations badge, no engineering clearance. She spoke from the gantry. The terminal intercom carried her voice across the full floor. That man is not a licensed systems engineer. He does not have authorization to touch terminal infrastructure. Get him away from my systems, now. The floor went quiet, the other kind of quiet. Caleb heard her. He set his hand flat on the panel. He did not lift it. A dock supervisor named Reed moved toward him. Caleb, come on, new director's watching. Caleb looked at the display. The conflict was in cycle 19 of 22. If he stepped back, the vessel would hit 4 degrees before the auto-correction fired. At 4 degrees under this load, the forward container stack would shift. He said quietly, tell her in 40 minutes. Reed stopped. He looked at the panel. He looked at Caleb's hand. He stepped back. 38 minutes later, the conflict resolved. The crane indicator went green. The Meridian Star sat level in the water. The floor went back to work without ceremony because there was cargo to move. Cassandra came down from the gantry. She found Roy Stearns near the loading bay. What just happened? She asked. Stearns chose his words carefully. Caleb resolved the Eastern berth fault. Caleb, the general operations worker. Yes. Why can he do that? He's been able to do that for about 2 years. She filed the incident that evening under unauthorized infrastructure access. She signed the formal notice. She set it on her desk and looked at it for a long time before she put it in the outbox. The notification arrived in Caleb's personnel file on a Wednesday. Roy Stearns delivered it in person. Cassandra Reeve is terminating your position effective Friday, Stearns said. Unauthorized access to restricted systems. Caleb looked at the document. He turned it over once. He set it down. Is the Eastern berth fault in the system log? No. He nodded. He folded the notice and put it in his shirt pocket. He finished the shift. Frank met him at the gate at 5. It won't hold, Frank said. Without you on that panel. The fault hasn't been fixed. The contractors don't understand it. I know, Caleb said. She doesn't know what she's done. She knows what the form said. He looked at the water. That's not the part that's wrong. He picked up Mara from the neighbors at 6. She was at the kitchen table with anchor and a drawing of a boat made of triangles. She looked up when he came in. You're different today, she said. He crouched to her level. I don't have work anymore. She processed this with the focused seriousness of a 3-year-old whose model of the world had just received new information. Are the boats okay? He looked at her for a moment. For now, he said. She handed him anchor. Hold him. He helps. The Meridian Star returned to the Eastern berth 14 days later carrying pharmaceutical cargo, temperature-controlled containers, tight scheduling, Halcyon's largest client on the manifest. The loading began at 8. By 9:47, the display board shifted. Cycle 11. The 2 contractors stood nearby with laptops open. At 10:12, the vessel hit 3 degrees. The forward stack shifted. 2 containers lost seal integrity. The pharmaceutical cargo was compromised. The penalty clause triggered at 11:15, $4.8 million. Cassandra was in her office when Roy Stearns knocked. He came in and set a single sheet on her desk. She read it. How long has this fault been present? She asked. At least 20 months. And Caleb has been managing it manually. Every time it cycles. She sat with that for a long moment. Then she asked the question she should have asked on the gantry. Who is he, actually? Stearns set a second sheet on the desk, a name, different from the one on the application, a credential, Maritime Systems Engineer, Class 1, and a technical paper, 9 years old. She read the title, Resonance Conflict in Legacy Digital Ballast Integration. She read the abstract. It described with precise technical detail the exact fault that had just cost her terminal $4.8 million. He wrote this, she said. Before he came here, Stearns said. Before his wife died. She drove to his apartment that evening. She drove herself. Mara answered the door with anchor raised by one flipper. Are you the boat lady? Mara asked. I work at the docks, yes. Mara nodded as though this were sufficient. Daddy is fixing my boat. She pointed inside. Caleb was at the kitchen table with a toy vessel in pieces and a miniature screwdriver in his hand. He looked up. He was not surprised. He set the screwdriver down. "Mara, go play in your room." Mara assessed that no one was upset and retreated with anger and her partial dignity. Cassandra sat at the table without being invited. She set the technical paper between them. He looked at it. He did not touch it. "The Meridian Star cargo," she said. 4.8 million. "I didn't know who you were when I removed you from the panel." "I know," he said. "I'm not offering that as an excuse. I made a decision about what I was looking at before I understood what I was looking at." He turned the screwdriver once in his hands. "That's a fast way to learn an expensive lesson. I need you to come back. 2 conditions, whatever they are." He looked at her. "The fault gets documented. Full technical record. Not managed around. Fixed. I'll write the specification. When I leave this terminal, the knowledge leaves with documentation, not with me." She nodded. "And the second? The shift supervisors get classification authority to authorize emergency infrastructure access without executive approval. Frank Delgado protected this terminal for 2 years on his own judgment. That judgment should be in the system." The table was quiet. From the back room, Mara was singing something tuneless to Anchor. "Done," Cassandra said. "Both of them." Caleb set the screwdriver down and went to get his jacket. Mara reappeared at the doorway, anchor aloft. "Is she staying for dinner?" Cassandra almost said no. Then she looked at the kitchen, the 2 cups on the counter, the triangular boat drawing on the table, the precise economy of a life organized around what mattered. "If there's enough," she said. Mara turned to her father with the authority of a child who has made an executive decision. "There's enough." Anchor counted. Something moved across Caleb's face that had not been there since the gantry, and had not been there, perhaps, for considerably longer than that. He went to the stove. He did not say anything further. He did not need to. The fault was documented and repaired over the following 19 days. Caleb wrote the specification from memory. 61 pages, clean and precise, with the confidence of someone transcribing something they had always known. Frank Delgado's classification was formally expanded. He folded the notification into his jacket pocket and did not mention it to anyone for the rest of the day. Caleb's new badge read Maritime Systems Engineer. He wore it the same way he had worn the old one. He arrived at 7, he did the work, he went home. On the first Friday of the following month, he came through the door at 5:30 and found Mara at the table with a new drawing. 2 figures at the end of a pier, a large boat in the background, water in careful blue loops. "Who are they?" he asked. Mara pointed. "That's you, that's me." She pointed at the boat. "That's the Meridian Star. Are we watching it?" Mara shook her head with the certainty of a child who had thought this through. "We're making sure it's okay. That's different." He set his hand on her shoulder the way he tied her shoes, with care that was precise and without excess. "Yeah," he said. "That's different." Outside, the harbor ran its evening sounds, the low percussion of water against hull, the distant call of a horn from the outer channel, and in the kitchen 4 blocks from the water, the sound of a child explaining to a stuffed seal why the boats need people who understand them, and a man listening with the particular attention of someone who has set something heavy down and is only now beginning to feel the difference in his hands.